Ah, so we're on. Okay, very good. You people up there? Okay, very good. So, welcome everyone. I believe this is the last session of this first 6 week part. The second 6 week part begins sometime at the end of June. Okay. So, for tonight, we had two chapters to look at chapter 16 and chapter 17. Not chapter 16 is about not negating enough. And my thought about that is that it's mainly focused on the difference between acquired delusion and innate delusion. When I say delusion, I mean, ignorance, acquired ignorance and innate ignorance. And I'm used to the whole phrase of intellectually acquired ignorance, which is uh, a type of ignorance that is acquired through the study of philosophy. Usually, and it would be a philosophy that's different from the Prasangika philosophy, Madhyamaka philosophy that's being presented here in this Lamrim Chenmo. So the ignorance is basically the same, that it's not just a mere lack of knowledge. It is the exact opposite to the wisdom realizing reality as it is, which is emptiness of inherent existence. So ignorance would be the conception that grasps inherent existence as real. And we're still in the broad section of identifying the object that's negated in the proof of emptiness. So we're still kind of narrowing in on what it is that is meant by inherent existence and its various synonyms, such as ultimate existence, true existence, existing by its own characteristics, and so forth. Also, substantially existing. So the point is that the intellectually acquired ignorance is not the root of cyclic existence. That's not the root ignorance that was identified by the Buddha in his presentation of the 12 links, because intellectually acquired ignorance is something that not everybody has. It's only generated through the force of studying philosophies that present a view contrary to the position of Prasangika Madhyamaka. And so the actual root ignorance that we need to identify and abandon is innate ignorance. And innate means that this is ignorance that we were born with and we've had from beginningless time, and we're unconscious of, really, until you start studying it, as we're trying to do. It's unconscious acceptance that things exist as they appear, and they appear to inherently exist. And so this ignorance accepts that appearance as true. So to me, that's what that chapter is all about. Let me see, I have some notes to see if there was anything else. Yeah, there was another point in this chapter talking about the nature of things, and in Sanskrit, the word nature is svabhava, and for those tantrikas amongst us, we recite that Svabhava mantra when we're blessing the inner offering. Om Svabhava Shuddha Dhamma Svabhava Shuddham, like that. So Svabhava means nature, and nature basically there's the nature which exists and the nature which does not exist. And the nature which exists is any object, or the characteristics of the object that come together with that object and are never separated from the object. Like, for instance, impermanence is the nature of sound. So whenever you have sound, you have impermanence. And if there's no impermanence, there's no sound. So they're one nature. Impermanence is the nature of sound, and impermanence is the nature of us. And whatever characteristics that we have that are always together with us, that's our nature. However, ignorance adds a nature to whatever there is, and that nature is inherent existence, and so that nature is an illusion. That's that needs to be recognized and abandoned. So in the term inherent existence, the the Tibetan word that translates Svabhava is Rongshin. And so Rongshingi Drupa, established by nature, is what's translated as inherent existence. So that nature is an illusion, and we're in the process of trying to identify that illusion so that we can have a target for our analysis, the ultimate analysis, which identifies whether or not things exist as they appear. And so we're trying to identify this appearance of inherent existence so we can analyze it to see if, in fact, it is there and findable by such an analysis. And this was, the advice that we were given earlier, that just like an archer needs to know what their target is in order to be able to hit it, so we need to identify the object to be negated, which is inherent existence, in order to be able to realize the emptiness of inherent existence. So, were there any other points that people found in that chapter that they wanted to discuss? Yeah, it was pretty straightforward, I thought. Yeah, so like, does anybody have an example of an intellectually acquired ignorance? I'll give you one. There's a there's a view of the person as being independent, heartless, and permanent, and that is a view that is I think the Vibhashika. That's one of the schools of the individual vehicle, and they have their own set of tenets, and one of their positions is that the person is empty of being permanent, partless, and independent. But permanent, partless, and independent is not an innate wrong view. That's a view that's acquired intellectually, and it is the view of the person that was presented through the Samkhya school of Hindu philosophy. And in the Samkhya school, I think Samkhya is translated into English as the enumerators. They've enumerated reality into 25 categories, and two of those categories are permanent. And one is the fundamental nature, and the other is the person. And the fundamental nature, or prakriti or prakrit, is they describe as this substance that pervades everything, and it is out of it that everything arises. Everything is made out of the Prakriti, uh, and uh, and somehow, even though it's responsible for whatever arises, it's considered permanent. And then there's the person, and the person is considered permanent as well. And the person is, it's not the ordinary way in which you see yourself, but something deeper, like the real person underneath, or maybe soul, something like that. Yeah. But the in Samkhya school, it would be the Atman, and they're and it is considered to be something that's permanent. It's partless. It's a whole thing without any parts, and it's independent of everything. And so their whole path is to recognize the real person, the Atman, underneath this superficial personality that we have, and to realize that it is in fact independent of all the conditionality around it. And when it realizes that, then the prakrit is stops formulating or creating this whole this whole cyclic existence for that person, and they achieve liberation or moksha. So this view of the person, from the Buddhist point of view, like the basic teaching of impermanence itself refutes the existence of such an independent, permanent, and partless person. The Buddha was taught impermanence, extensively. It was an easier thing to realize than emptiness of inherent existence. But if you realize that everything is impermanent, including yourself, it helps a lot to be able to develop more detachment to things, not be so overwhelmed by desires, attachment. Okay. Yeah, so sometimes you hear, like on a conventional level, we have a nature of being impermanent, we have the nature of being human beings, we have all of this. The ultimate nature of reality is emptiness of inherent existence. So you hear the term nature used in different ways. And we find in this presentation that Tsongkhapa, in order to, he's teaching emptiness here by means of referring to classical Indian texts, and this is part of traditional scholarship, that it's a combination of sound logical reasoning on the basis of scriptural citation, and so we're dealing a lot with learning how terms are being used in these different citations that he brings up, these different references. So, if somebody, like if your own teacher was going to teach you emptiness, they wouldn't be as complicated as Tsongkhapa is being, but as he was a super scholar and he was writing for other scholars. And so he had to, follow the tradition of justifying his view by saying, this is what the great scholars have said in the past, such as Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Buddhapalita, Chandakirti, Bhavaviveka. This is what they said, and this is what I think they mean. And then he gives his justification and so forth. And then by that explanation, then we gain, added confidence that this is not just something that he was making up. Because as you may have gathered, that in order to gain liberation, we have to understand emptiness, and to understand, and not only understand it in emptiness, but have a direct experience of it. And to gain a direct experience of it, you have to understand it and then develop single pointed concentration on it. And then you get a direct experience of it. But that's a huge effort. And you don't want to dedicate all of that effort, all of that attention to the wrong object. So you have to be confident. And so that's why this is especially useful to study a presentation by such a scholar as Lama Tsongkhapa. Okay, I'm going to go on to 17, chapter 17 now. And chapter 17 is the actual object to be negated. I found that it was actually kind of difficult to identify any sentence in this chapter that describes the actual object to be negated. I had to go searching through it several times to find it. But so that's just the where he's still making use of all of these different texts and explaining what they mean and trying to narrow in on the actual meaning of inherent existence. So the actual object being negated, we start off with, well, we have this term negate, negated. And he brings up that there's two things that need to be negated. And one is the obstacles to liberation and the obstacles to knowledge or omniscience. And negated in the sense of abandoned, gotten rid of, so they never arise again. And those obstacles are things that actually exist, right? So ignorance actually exists, attachment, anger, all of the 84,000 delusions, they actually exist. So we're having to get rid of, abandon things that exist because they're based, they arise from root ignorance, which is a misconception of how things exist. And so we can abandon those things, those delusions, those afflictions, those obstacles to knowledge, because they're based upon a misconception of how things actually exist. And so the method of abandoning these obstacles to liberation and obstacles to knowledge is by following the path. Okay, that's the general explanation, by following the path. And then the other negation is by negating something that doesn't exist. And Lama Tsongkhapa brings up all of these contrary points of view that he answers their questions, and it's a means of explaining points that where doubts may have arisen. So, like one contrary view says, "Well, what's the point in negating something that doesn't exist? It doesn't exist. You're wasting your breath." And Lama Tsongkhapa says, points out, well, that's pretty stupid because if you think that it exists, then you have to analyze those thoughts and discover their limitations and where they're wrong. And when you discover that point of view is wrong, then you can abandon it. So that's why we have to rely upon sound reasoning, right? Sound reasoning to be able to identify these wrong views and abandon them. And we can also use reasoning to verify that things exist. Like using reasoning to gain a confident belief in reincarnation, the existence of karma, the Four Noble Truths, Buddhahood, etc. So, and also using the sound reason to identify the inherent existence and the reasoning used, such as dependent arising, to realize that things are in fact empty, of inherently existing. Yeah, and this brings up the point of that ignorance, the ignorance, which is the misconception grasping at inherent existence, is considered an obstacle to liberation by the Prasangika school. Other schools, even Buddhist schools, other Buddhist schools believe that that the ignorance that grasp the inherent existence of phenomena is an obstacle to knowledge. It's something that has to be abandoned to achieve Buddhahood, whereas ignorance, which grasps the self of person, is an obstacle to liberation. So they would say that there's two different wisdoms that are needed to abandon the obstacles to liberation and the obstacles to knowledge, um, such as the you know even the well say the Yogacara or Sautrantika schools. They would say that the self of person that needs to be abandoned is the person that exists as substantially existent and yeah, substantially existent and can be found within the aggregates like that. And they have a different meaning of substantially existent than the Prasangikas. Prasangika say that substantially existent is a synonym of inherently existing, but these other schools they accept that things inherently exist. So so their view of the self that needs to be abandoned is a grosser level of self than the Prasangika assert. But the main point that's being made here is that for the Prasangika, the ignorance that grasps at inherent existence is an obstacle to liberation. And there's two forms of it. There's the ignorance grasping the inherent existence of the person, and the ignorance grasping the inherent existence of all remaining phenomena, like that. And for the Prasangika, the basic misconception is the same. It's a grasping at inherent existence, and the only difference between these two is the base that it's being looked at. On the one hand, it's a person. On the other hand, it's all other phenomena, such as the body, the mind, the objects of the senses, and so on. So that's and you know, and Lama Tsongkhapa gives all kinds of references to show that that's the case. That the great masters such as Nagarjuna and so on, that was their belief based upon uh, on the studies that Nagarjuna did of the perfection of wisdom sutras. There's quite a story that Nagarjuna went to the realm of the Nagas to get these sutras that the Nagas had been preserving from the time of the Buddha. You know, at some point they must have been written down, but there was a time when the Mahayana tradition was being persecuted, and that all of these sutras of the universal vehicle had to be hidden, and so the Nagas, which are like uh, mer people, like that, the that they had quite a number of these sutras, and they had them hidden. And there's a place in Kathmandu Valley called Swayambhu, where there's a Newari Buddhist. Newari Buddhists were the Buddhists of Nepal. Newari Buddhist temple there that has said to have this stairway that goes deep into the hill of Swayambhu, and where the Naga realm was, and where Nagarjuna went to get these sutras. There's a large mountain to the west of Kathmandu Valley called what is it? Nagarjuna Kot, something like that. Nagarjuna's mountain, because he's said to have meditated there, and so then he went down to the Naga realm in under Kathmandu Valley, found these sutras, studied them well, and then wrote the various commentaries that he wrote, and then defended them against the other scholars who were thinking that he had gone too far in negating inherent existence. So anyway, from his point of view, and then from the point of view of his main disciple Aryadeva, then the other great masters who followed him, such as Buddha Palita, Chandrakshita, not Chandrakshita, I mean Chandrakirti, all the great masters, including the masters of Tibet, they all accept that the wisdom realizing the emptiness of inherent existence, whether it be based on a person or based upon any other phenomena, is an obstacle to liberation. The obstacles to knowledge are, in fact, imprints left in the mind that are from grasping at inherent existence, and the effect of these imprints is causing things to appear to inherently exist. And the ignorance is a conception that believes that appearance to be true. So the appearance of inherent existence comes from these imprints, and they're regarded as obstacles to knowledge because they are an obstacle to being able to see everything, even the aspects of phenomena, not only the profound reality of emptiness itself, but all the aspects of phenomena, to be able to see it all clearly as they are. And so the Buddha has that attainment in order to be able to benefit sentient beings by being able to know exactly what they need at any moment in time, and thus act on it to help each and every one of us in start and continue with the path to liberation and enlightenment. Is that pretty clear? Okay.
Excuse me, Pende.
Yes. Yes.
It's Toby. I was
I
surprised.
recognize your voice, Toby.
Okay. I was surprised to hear that the ignorance grasping at inherent existence is an obstacle of liberation, according to
Yeah.
the Prasangika.
Uh-huh. Yes.
I always thought it was an obstacle to omniscience or knowledge.
Yes.
So I'm really not understanding why that would be so. Why it would
Okay.
be an obstacle to liberation.
All right. So Nagarjuna wrote a text called The Precious Garland. You're familiar with that text?
I have had teachings on it.
Yeah. So that text. And in that text, Nagarjuna talks about the ignorance grasping at the inherent existence of the aggregates, of the objects, of the senses, of the 18 or the various elements of the body and so forth. And he said that because we grasp objects as inherently existing, that gives rise to the to attachment, the attachment that exaggerates this apparent inherently existing object as being a source of happiness. And so he said that as long as that that ignorance, grasping the inherent existence of the object exists, then attachment will arise. Similarly, so long as there is the ignorance that grasps a person as inherently existing, then the characteristics or properties that we ascribe to that person will appear to inherently exist. And if we ascribe characteristics of being a harmful, hateful person, then anger and hatred will arise towards that person. So these other afflictions, such as attachment and hatred, arise from the ignorance grasping at inherent existence, like that. That was his reasoning, and that's my story.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. I'm sticking to it, huh?
And it's interesting because you know, in the Buddha taught, you know, he taught for over 40 years, and he taught all manner of members of society, and so he taught many different antidotes to the afflictions that are troubling persons, such as for a person who is addicted to the pleasurable objects, then he would teach them how to meditate on the ugly side of that object in order to bring down their attachment, right? So that they would have a neutral view towards the object. And but that meditation itself does nothing to help overcome anger. In fact, if they go too far in looking at the ugly aspects of the person, they might develop aversion and anger towards them. So, and similarly, for a person who has a problem with anger, he would teach patience and loving kindness. So, by meditating on loving kindness towards the person, their anger can go down, but it won't affect their attachment. And it's similar with the other afflictions. So there is one antidote of meditating on the emptiness of inherent existence that eliminates all the afflictions, because it's the root of all the afflictions. And when one realizes the emptiness of it, then all the afflictions will be abandoned, like that. So the first time I heard that, I decided I'm going to meditate on the emptiness of it. I better realize the emptiness of inherent existence, because that seems to be the most efficient way to achieve liberation. But of course, I have learned along the way that it's not easy to make a meditation on emptiness effective against, you know, these other afflictions that are so strongly ingrained, like attachment, anger, jealousy, all these other things. So it's important to develop skills in managing those in an effective way, while at the same time trying to build the strength of one's wisdom to understand and realize emptiness. Was that somebody else speaking? Okay, go ahead.
I think it's me that you're. Anyway, you use the term, I think, substantially existing when you differentiated between a lower school that
I know.
said, okay. So you said that they could, by their view, they could realize emptiness of phenomena, but they still retain something on the person's side that you refer to as substantially existing.
Self-supporting and substantially existing is the term.
What does it mean?
What does it mean?
Yeah.
okay, that's so that is the person that it let's see, what does it mean? It can be findable in the aggregates. Okay. It's findable within the aggregates. It's his own um, uh, own being existing as not a mere creation of thought. So that's substantial. Self-supporting is that it's yeah, it has its own specific mode of existence within the aggregates, as opposed to, yeah, within the aggregates like that.
And you wouldn't call that like the superimposed I
I
that
know
is,
it's very close. It's very close. you know, this. I have a weakness here. I admit it. I'm so focused on the Prasangika view of the person and everything that the views of the lower schools is a little bit harder because, like, for instance, the self-supporting substantially existing self has an intellectually acquired mode and an innate mode. And the intellectually acquired mode is where it exists independently of the aggregates. Okay? And yeah, so that would be like the person who's the owner of the aggregates, where the body and the mind are something separate from it, and it is the owner of those. But a person that exists independent of the aggregates is so easy to refute, right? Because all the characteristics of the person are derived from the aggregates. It's so easy to refute that it's hard to take that one seriously.
well, what would they say went from life to life? Is it something like that's what they're talking about, or is it just? I mean, because it doesn't make any sense to me. So
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
leave it.
they're just talking. Well, it must be similar to that permanent, partless, and independent person, but not the same. That permanent, partly, and independent person is the Atman preached by the Samkhya school, whereas some other school must have said no, it's not like that, but it's similar to that.
Leave it at
So
that.
and then the Dalai Lama once said that there's an innate form of that, and that would be where such a person is not existing separately from the aggregates, but is a separate entity within the aggregates, almost like a tapeworm.
Like there's five aggregates so there's five people.
I know, I know that it's not identical with the aggregates, but something within the aggregates. It's like John Fay one time pointed out when got an explanation of what the five aggregates were, and the fourth one, which is called compounded phenomena,
Mhm.
right? Well, compounded phenomena includes not only the other of the 51 mental factors, but also impermanent properties of that can be ascribed to the person, including the person. The person is included in that aggregate. And so John Fay pointed out, well, it sounds like the person can be found in the five aggregates, so it must inherently exist. That's what you get when you study just the meaning of words and so on. But our job, our task, is to try to identify the innate, uh, the object viewed by the innate ignorance, and following the Prasangika point of view is the person that inherently exists. I'm sorry I can't be any more clear than that, Bob.
It's okay.
Okay, what other things? All right. Now, there is a quote in this. Is this it? Okay. I found something here that describes what the actual object to be negated is. It's on page 212. In the middle of the page, there's a question. How does ignorance superimpose intrinsic nature? And then Lama Tsongkhapa replies, in general, there appear in Chandrakirti's texts many usages of verbal conventions such as nature or essence with regard to objects that exist only conventionally. However, here in this case of reification by ignorance, there is, with regard to objects, be they persons or phenomena, a conception that those phenomena have ontological status, i.e., a way of existing in and of themselves, without being posited through the force of an awareness. The referent object that is thus apprehended by that ignorant conception, the independent ontological status of those phenomena, is identified as a hypothetical self or intrinsic nature. Right. And another way of describing it is like if we have labels or names of things, and if you look for the meaning of that label, what's being referred to by that label, and analyze that and look for that, if it actually exists there, then that would inherently exist. And the classic example would be the rope that appears like a snake, and so some person gets frightened, and because they grasp that appearance as a snake, and so when what they're frightened of is a snake, but there's no snake there. So in fact, the snake that they're frightened of is something that they've imputed, they've designated snake. But when you look to see in the place where that snake should be, there's no snake whatsoever, right? Now, let's take a real snake. We have the name snake, and if you look in the place where the snake should be, is the snake the head of the snake? Is it the tail of the snake? Is it the belly of the snake? Is it the back of the snake? Is it the skin of the snake? Is it a single scale of the snake? Is it one eye of the snake, two eyes of the snake, the fangs of the snake, etc., etc.? You can't find a real snake there. All you have, the snake exists through the force of designation. And in the Prasangika view, designation is a broader idea than just the use of language, giving a name to something. We conceptualize about it, and that creates the object. And there's one description by one of the Indian masters. I think his name was Damotara, and he described that this process of designation comes from an aggregate of discernments, which the second mental factor is discernment or recognition, and that is the mental factor that's responsible for discerning objects or identifying objects, such as by name. Or if it's just like a visual consciousness, it can discern a difference between yellow and red, like that. so, but so this aggregate of discernment means that it's described as from beginningless time, we have identified things in various ways. And so we have this propensity to identify things. And that's where this this propensity comes from, this beginningless discernments, and the function of this discernment mental factor over beginningless time. And it's interesting that in the Prasangika, they have a unique tenet of saying that direct perception includes conceptuality. And so their definition of, no, in particular, I'm talking about mental direct perception. Now, in the other schools, when they give a definition of mental direct perception, it begins with free from conceptuality. But the Prasangika definition of mental direct perception doesn't include that. And its dominant condition is a previous state of mind, a previous cognition, and unlike the five senses, where the dominant condition would be a sense faculty. In the case of a mental direct perception, it's the mental faculty, which is an immediately preceding cognition. And so what they're referring to is, you can have for example, a visual sense perception that is perceiving a color, and right after, and that image arises, and that becomes a cause of a mental direct perception, which identifies the object as, say, a blue color, like that. And this is where a designation or imputation takes place. And so being a blue color is something that doesn't exist in the outer world by itself. It is designated as blue, because what would a blue color of what? I mean, when you talk about a blue color, there's a lot of things that are combined, and there's nothing real there that owns it, right? You can designate entities, and you can designate the properties of entities, but there's no real entity that has the property of being blue, because when you look for that real entity, you can't find it. So we have, so according to the Prasangika, that things are established merely through the process of designation by thought and language. So so there was that example of the snake and the rope that looks like a snake. It's really important to do the practice of looking for examples of things that appear to have a substantial existence, existing objectively in their own right, but are merely designated by thought. There's many examples that are given in the scriptures, such as the snake example and the rope, snake and the rope, the reflections in the mirror, and so on. But it's, in the process of developing wisdom, there's three different types of wisdom, right? Wisdom of listening, thinking, and meditating. The wisdom of listening or reading is that you develop an understanding based upon the examples and explanations and reasoning that the author or teacher gives. The wisdom arising from thinking is that wisdom increases by the use of your own examples and your own reasoning. And then the wisdom, of course, arising from meditation is that when you take the results of the first two wisdom and you have an object that's clear enough to meditate on it, then you develop a deeper and deeper understanding, and eventually a direct experience of that object. So, so it's really it behooves us to think of our own examples. You know, like for instance, one example that I had thought of, and I use a lot in explaining it, would be the example of a political border. You know, I used to teach a lot internationally. I crossed a lot of borders, and I learned that there's a whole, you know, procedure that you follow through on. And if you follow the procedure correctly, you get your visa and you can enter the country and stay there as long as you want. But if you tell the person in immigration that oh, I want to stay here for I don't know, maybe 9 months, they're going to say, you're going to have to sit down over here. You know, so you learn those procedures, and of course, people when they go to Canada, the border is something that it seems like a physical phenomena, right? You can get closer to it. You can go over the border. You can almost as if the front of your car is in Canada and you're sitting in one of the seats and you're still in the United States. It's as if it's a physical phenomena. And yet, if you analyze the physical base, it's just dirt. And it's no different from American dirt and Canadian dirt. And the dirt has been there before there was a Canada and a USA. And, you know, Canadian geese, they don't know they're Canadian geese. That's why they have no problem living here in the United States. So it's just merely, and if you want to, if and borders, when they move a border, sometimes it happens where a border is moved. It doesn't take dump trucks to, you know, scoop up earth and move it someplace. It happens hundreds or thousands of miles away, you know, where they change the numbers in a book that correspond to the language of maps, right? So it's a mere designation by name and thought. And yet, if you try to cross the border into Canada and you forgot your passport, and you tell them, oh, come on, and it's just a mere designation, it's not going to work. So they're very attached to their, you know, the protocol of following it. But so that's one example of something that appears to be existing from its own side, but it really isn't. There was another example that came to my mind once. I don't even know if I can describe this clearly enough, but remember spotlights that would create these big beams of light? And you know, they used to have them in, like in Hollywood when a new movie, but they also had them in Second World War in, for example, in London. When London was being bombed, there'd be all these spotlights up there trying to identify where the bombers were so that the AK guns could have their target and so on. So you have these beams of light coming up. And let's say these two beams of light intersect with each other, okay? And for a moment, they're not moving. They stay intersected. That point of intersection, I'm going to call a diamond because it has the same shape as the diamond suit in cards, right? And then because it's a little bit lighter, because you've got two beams of light intersecting together, it's a little bit brighter. So I'm going to call it the luminous diamond. So now we have a name and we've identified this thing. It's the luminous diamond. And you can actually imagine that there could be a number of these over the city of London, all these luminous diamonds. And then maybe somebody makes a logo. They remove the beams, but they keep the diamonds over London. And their motto is, we protect against death and destruction. And we like those who like us, and we dislike those who don't like our logo. So now we have attachment and anger rising up over the luminous diamonds. But in fact, the light beam has no real luminous diamond in it at all. When the beams of light move apart, that diamond disappears like that. So it's like that, you know. There's nothing objectively there, but we designate something, and that that is its existence through the process of designation. And when we don't realize how things come into existence, but believe that they exist in their own right, which is the way they appear to exist in their own right, then we suffer the consequences, which is death and rebirth from beginningless time and endlessly, unless we can develop the wisdom realizing emptiness. So your homework is to come up with your own examples of things that exist by mere designation, but but when you analyze where these things would be if they existed in their own right, you can't find them at all, right? Like the border, you can't find it all. The luminous diamond, you can't find. There's an appearance, but it's just the intersection of two light beams that are devoid of luminous diamond, like that. And also like the snake, which doesn't exist in the striped rope. The person who's a reflection in a mirror doesn't exist from its own side, and so on. There's all these different examples that we read about, but we do these things all the time. And also there was they brought up the point, or Emerson Kappa brought up the point, and he referred to other scholars talking about it. When root ignorance, Chandrakirti said, the root of cyclic existence is ignorance grasping at inherent existence. And at another time, he has said that there are three sources of cyclic existence: the selflessness, what is it? Selflessness, wishlessness. What's the other one? There's three of them. The three, I forget. So, signless and wishless. Selfless, signless, and wishless. So they said, was Chandrakirti confused? Because on the one hand he says there's one root, on the other hand he says there were three. And then this got into and that the whole point, I mean, wishless and signless, signless means that causes are empty of inherent existence, and wishless is that results are empty of inherent existence, and then selflessness is the root one, the mere emptiness of inherent existence. And then what about the root of, or the obstacle to liberation is the ignorance grasping at inherent existence. What about the view of the perishing aggregates? That's also described as the obstacle to liberation. And so there was some discussion about that the view of the perishing aggregates is a specific example of ignorance grasping at inherent existence. And then there was a whole discussion about, is every grasping at the inherent existence of a person an example of the view grasping at the perishing aggregates? Because the view grasping at the perishing aggregates is an ignorance grasping at the inherent existence of the person, but the view grasping just any person existing as inherently, that is not necessarily the view grasping at the perishing aggregates, because the view grasping at the perishing aggregates has as its basis the label I. And so the only time you have the label I is when you're thinking personally of I or me or mine. And that brings up your personal sense of person, not some other person. So that was interesting, because if you analyze the aggregates, then you would be doing a meditating on a selflessness of phenomena, right? Of objects, rather than a selflessness of persons. So I think it was Chandrakirti said that the actual base is the designation of I, and then viewing that designation of I as existing in its own right. That is the view of the perishing aggregates. So, so when you're meditating on a personal selflessness, you would generate the thought of I, and how would you do that? Well, you might play around a little bit, and like I was doing this afternoon, and say, "Hey, I heard Thubten Pende is going to teach the Kopan course. Where is Thubten Pende?" "Right here. I'm here." And so that I immediately think, well, what appeared in my mind when I said, "I'm here"? What appeared? It happened so fast. And it was just kind of a picture of my body, kind of with the thought, "I'm here," kind of thing, like that. So then you'd analyze that. Is this person there? Or is it a mere designation by name and thought? Like that. Huh? Bob, go ahead.
I've always had a problem with the concept of like the reflection of in a mirror, or the image of on the lake where you look at still water, and the idea one of my teachers uses of the hand, because to me, okay, the hand is an imputation based on a collection of parts and parts and parts and parts, but there's something that is conventionally existing, which we impute with the label hand, and yet the reflection of
hand.
hand.
Yes.
Hand.
Okay.
And yet there's like the image of in the mirror. It doesn't come across the same way to me, and I was wondering, or like the snake and the rope. One's a correct perception, that's an imputation, the hand, and the other is an incorrect perception, whether it be the snake or the image in the mirror. And so in my mind, maybe you can help me put it together in a way that it's all symbiotic or something.
Yeah. I know that the example of the mirror reflection. They talk about, you look in the mirror, you see your face, and you think it's a real face, right? So I'm thinking I'm thinking that must have been during the time of the Buddha. They didn't have really good mirrors. And the only ones that had really good mirrors were like the upper class, whereas everybody else didn't. And so there may have been times when somebody may have walked by a reflection and they're not used to seeing such a clear reflection. And then they were startled. There I am, but like that. And so for me, the example of the mirror is more pronounced when I think of these videos that I've seen, like a child standing in front of a mirror, or an animal like a cat in front of the mirror and seeing their reflection and thinking there's a real person there. Okay, you've seen those videos, right? Like that. That's where the mistake is obvious. The mistake is obvious, especially when the kid like looks around behind the mirror for the kid they're looking at. Their twin, So that you can use that as an example rather than like your own face we're so used to using mirrors that we don't see the face in the mirror as a real face, right? But there are, people or animals who are not used to mirrors, that when they see the reflection, they think it's a real creature there, like that. And as far as the hand example, well, yeah. So there's a conventional hand, but it's only when we say a conventional hand, it just means that by the customary use of language and the like, there's a hand there. Otherwise, you could, somebody might say, "Oh, the five fingers, five-finger shorty, or who's a really good thief," something like that. So it's just a label because there's parts, and this is another homework assignment. When you look at something, particularly an attractive object, okay, when you're looking at an attractive object in particular, notice what your eyes are doing. I notice myself when I look at an attractive object, my eyes move. Like if it's an attractive woman, my eyes might see her eyes, and then it might see her hair, and then it might see her, the shape of her body. It doesn't stay in one place because that object is a manyness. It's not a unitary thing. So watch that, and that will give you a sense of that although conceptually we say that person is beautiful, that what you're pointing to as that person is a manyness. There's not a real substantial, objectively existing person there. Okay, we have run out of time. And I hope this has been helpful. I know it's been helpful for me. I've run the roller coaster. There are times I thought, oh, I really understand this stuff. And at other times I'm thinking, man, I don't understand a word. So it's been very helpful for me. And I hope it's been helpful for you too. So hopefully we'll see you all again when we resume at the end of June. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pende.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very helpful.
Great. Thanks.